Hey, FlimsyLunchTray here, and welcome to World of Warships for our Saturday edition video. Actually, a little behind getting this video out today, so I sat down and forgot, oh, I need to do that video. So here we are. We're going to be doing an upgraded commander build video here on the Tier 10 Japanese battleship, the Bungo. I think that's how you pronounce it. Who knows? I'm sure someone will let me know if I pronounce it wrong, as that tends to happen. So, we're going to get right into it. So what type of battleship is the Bungo? Well, she's much more of a mid-range to long-range battleship. You know, you have brawling battleships, you've got sniping battleships, then you've got the mid-range battleships, and she's really mid to long-range for a few reasons. One is her concealment's really good at 12.1 kilometers. I tend to define mid-range at the high tiers 12 kilometers and 15, and the long range really begins to become 16. And so, just my observation, my opinion. And also her survivability is among the lowest of the tier 10 battleships here in World of Warships. So she can't take a lot of punishment for very long. Also because she's kind of got a little bit more of that battle cruiser armament style, if you will. So, in talking more about it, she's got 25mm fore end and the aft end plating. Now you can actually see she's a little more favorable to play in kiting away. As you see here, she's got a lot of 32mm on her deck plating. So not as much of the 25mm as you do have on the bow. And anyhow, you have 6 of your 10 457mm turrets on the back of the ship. So she's kind of more ideally positioned in that kiting role. And you can see here we have an armor belt, 343mm, and then you have some torpedo protection, which isn't super strong. It's a little lackluster, if you will, but we'll take that away. And then you can see you've got that 343 armor belt beneath, so you can definitely bounce things if you're angling your armor belt right. And of course up here it's only 32mm, so you'll take a lot of pins across the upper armor belt here on the Bungo. Continue to take things away. You can actually see her citadels beneath waterline. It says sloped, and it is indeed. So when you you don't notice it actually until you begin turning and looking at the observation angles. So it's possible to bounce something up into the superstructure and just get a pin rather than having a citadel. I've been citadeled here and there, but not very often, just because of the slope and just how much lower the citadel is. And then looking at your gun mount armor, 356 on the front, 190 on the side, and 190 on the back, with 152 on top. Then beneath, 343. So your front being the strongest, which you can see there's not a lot of turret surface area, I guess, as it were, until you get to the sides where you begin to have a lot. So ideally with her armor scheme, you're going to want to be trying to angle out and away when possible, and using a little bit more of that 32mm deck plating where the nose, it's not massive, but you know, 25mm at tier 10 isn't great because there's just more battleships, more cruisers that are going to be able to overmatch and pin you there. That being said, let's first look at her modules here. So with the configuration we have right now, with the reload in the slot 6, our reload time is 26.4 seconds. We have a 43.1 second 180 degree turn time. Now we could improve that if we took the main battery mod 3, or mod 2. Here, I'll get into that, but for now we haven't. HE shell damage, pretty good, for 7,300, and your AP shell damage is 13,500. Hit points, 82,800. She's got better AA than the Yamato, but it's still slightly lackluster, if you will, but is better than the Yamato. And she's got a little bit of secondary deal going for her as well. She has the 100mm, that 100mm turrets that can pin 30mm, and then she's got 140mm, but those only pin 23. So this isn't a secondary brawling battleship, but as you saw, if I'll tag it at the end of this video, the Friday highlight, we actually got, I think, like over 90 secondary hits, and we did a little decent chunk of damage there. Not because I wanted to brawl, just it was the situation that we found ourselves in. Your main battery firing range is plenty, 25 kilometers as a whole, and you still have the high precision spotter that gives you plus 10% on your gun firing range. So you have all the range in the world that you need. And then propulsion, you have 215,000 horsepower, gives you 30 knots, but I like to take Sarah Mike flag and bumps me up to 31.5. So there's still a good number of other battleships that can outpace you, but there are other battleships you are faster than. So she's kind of a decent speed, if you will. Then if you decide to throw a brisk in, get a little bit faster. We'll talk about that on the commander as well. For the first upgrade slot, I have elected to take the main armaments mod 1 to reduce the risk of our main battery becoming incapacitated by negative 20%, main battery survivability plus 50%, and main battery repair time negative 20%. Because basically this ship is all about the main battery guns, so we want to keep those operable as much as possible. Maybe a slight argument could be made if you want to take the spotting aircraft modification 1, as this also would impact the high precision spotter that you have, and adding plus 30%. The action time on it right now is 65 seconds. So if you're looking to get maybe one more salvo off as an example before the high precision spotter would go down, but I don't know how I feel about it. I just kind of prefer taking the main armaments mod 1 in general. It's a pretty good option here to run. Second slot, 2 options. Damage control system mod 1 is really going to be the one to go with. Reduce your risk of catching fire, negative 5%. Risk of flooding, negative 3%. In slot 3, I've elected to take the aiming systems mod 1. Maximum main battery shell dispersion, negative 7%. And we get a slight buff on our secondary battery range and our secondary battery shell dispersion. I'll put on the right side of the screen here what this does, because it improves our maximum horizontal dispersion and our maximum vertical dispersion. So it's even tighter shell groupings, speaking in that direction. And then if you were not to run it, let's say you took main battery mod 2, you can see what it looks like. You're going to give up a little, some meters of vertical and horizontal dispersion, but you're going to have a faster turret traverse rate rather than having the 43.1 seconds we have now. Probably looking to be, beneath 40 seconds, 39, 38 perhaps. But for myself, because this battleship is really a quite accurate battleship, rather accurate guns, high Sigma, 2.2 Sigma, really good, like Yamato has 2.1 as an example. Sigma just means chances of a shell light landing in the center of the target where you're aiming, the higher the better. So I prefer going for the aiming systems mod 1. I mean, all I do is I just focus on my positioning here when I'm angling in, angling out, making sure I'm turning my turrets in time, using the right mouse key to do the free look, and that has done me just fine. Slot 4, we've gone for the damage control system mod 2. This is reducing our fire extinguishing time and flooding recovery time by negative 15%. As I noted in the beginning of this video, only 82,800 hit points, so we want to try to keep what hit points, what health pool we have. So I have preferred to go this route. I don't know how I would really feel about propulsion mod 1. I mean, if you want to juke some salvos from enemy ships, if you're playing 15 kilometers and back, it's a possible option to take, but with a lot of the HE spam you have at the high tier and tier 10 and the super ships, I just elected to stick with the damage control system mod 2, and that has done me just fine here. Slot 5, I mean, was really the winner here is the concealment system mod 1, which is reducing your ship's detectability range by negative 10%, and struck squadron detectability range by negative 10%, and dispersion of shells fired by enemies attacking your ship plus 5%, meaning they have worse dispersion when they're firing upon you. So you can see 12.1 by sea and 10.4 by air. And this is a battleship that has the second best concealment in the game at tier 10, only being beaten out by Incomparable, and in third place would be the Thunderer. So really, why not make it the best, right? Among the best in the game. So that's really what you're going to want to run for and what I would recommend. And then in the 6th slot, really the winner is the main battery mod 3 here. To reduce your main battery reload time by negative 12%. Granted, you take a slight nerf on your main battery traverse speed by negative 13%. When you look at the gunfire control system, you have 25 kilometers. Why would you really want more? Unless you want to reach out and hit a CV. And in that case, you have the high precision spotter that's giving you that additional 10% range. So then you're adding 2.5 kilometers on, right? So you have all the range you need. There's no need to take the gunfire control system mod 2. because 25 is just great. If you're constantly playing the ship at 24, 25 kilometers, I'd be like, why? You know, why? You're going to be much better off getting into the 15 kilometer range, because these guns are hard hitting and they're really accurate, and why not make them even more accurate in getting closer to the target? So having the reload time of that 26.4 seconds is great because it's increasing your damage per minute, right? So really good option to run there. In terms of our armament, these are 457s. She's got 10 457s. They have a 35% chance of causing fire on a target. They can pin 77 millimeters, and their initial velocity is 805 meters a second. On the armor piercing, they do 13,500 maximum damage. Their initial velocity is faster than the high explosive at 860 meters a second. And then our depth charge airstrike, which thankfully is 11 kilometer maximum range with a reload time of 30 seconds with 2 available flights and 2 bombs per payload with a maximum bomb damage of 4,900. Quite comfortable to have the 11 kilometers, so really good to have here versus some of the other tier 10 battleships that have 5-6 kilometers as an example. So 11 kilometer is good. Now in terms of our consumables, you have the damage control party. You can see here consumable action time only 10 seconds, so it's not like maybe more than 15 seconds that you'll see. So only 10 seconds here with LA Commander perk that would bump us up to 11 seconds. Cooldown time 80 seconds. Unlimited charges. Repair party HP per second 414. Action time 28 seconds. We can bump that up with the commander skill I'll talk about. It's the last one I need to run. Cooldown time 80 seconds. Take the India Delta combat signal. It's going to bump us up to plus 496. So when I'm playing ranked randoms or clan battles, if I were with Bungo, I would be running the India Delta combat signal. Definitely a no-brainer to run there. And then we have decisions between the high precision spotter and the fighter. The fighter is pretty... You really don't want to run it here, okay? The reason why is not only are you getting a plus 10% maximum or the main battery firing range, you're getting that maximum main battery shell dispersion, negative 20%. Another reason why I like running the aiming systems mod 1, because we're getting a built-in baked constant negative 7. And then if you want to add that in, it's negative 27%, if you will. So really good stuff. Granted, you're only going to have it for 65 seconds. We get 5 of these charges. But some sick things you can do. It's kind of like Wargaming bringing Deadeye back when they first introduced it in the game back in update 10.0. And if you're not familiar with what Deadeye was, I think it was a skill giving negative 20% dispersion when you fired from your battleship undetected. So then you had a lot. It killed the brawling in the game pretty harshly because people wanted to be undetected with their GKs. GK sniper builds became a thing then. It was a weird time until they took that out in update 10.4. But they brought it back in a consumable fashion at the high precision spotter, if you will. But it has a shorter cooldown time than a normal spotter plane would, 120 seconds. So it doesn't take too long for it to come back up. And in yesterday's video, you can see the examples of me using this consumable. In terms of the combat signals, you're going to be running Juliet Charlie combat signal, completely eliminating the risk of your ship's magazine detonating. We want to reduce the fire extinguishing time, improve it as it were, and the flooding recovery time by negative 20%. I run the Hotel Yankee, increased damage caused by ramming enemy plus 50%. You take 20% less, so sometimes you can get Die Hard achievement, where you ram the enemy, kill them, but they don't kill you because they weren't running a Hotel Yankee. I like Take November Foxtrot. It reduces the preparation and reload time on your consumables. So now I get my cooldown time on my repair party back at 76 seconds, and my repair party also 76 seconds. In my spotter plane, high precision spotter, 114 versus 120. And then I go ahead and I bump my AA a little bit. So I go from a rating of, what was that? Was it 82 or 81? Yeah, we were at 81. So it actually puts us up into 83. And when we look at our AA defense, you can see 366 continuous damage, 1600 damage by shell explosions. I take it off, 349 and 1540. So when I run a full combat signal configuration, this is what I run. Now going into our commander, which is Azuma from Azure Lane. You can obtain her via the Azure Lane collection, which is in your profile. if it decides to work for me. So it's one of these. I've got a lot. I don't know if I'll even recognize it just by glancing here. No, probably not. But it's in here, and that's where you'll obtain her at 10 points. So there's no enhanced skills that you get, or talents, I guess I should say. No talents, no enhanced skills. But it's just kind of funny for myself. I like the switching up the voiceover to something I don't even understand. But with that being said, what would I recommend for a 21-point build? So let's start off here. So I have taken Gunfeeder to reduce the main battery shell type switching time, negative 40%. So you may have seen it earlier. So it's a 15.8 seconds. I mean, AP is always really good to fire, but maybe you have a destroyer pops up, a submarine pops up. Kind of have that thought in mind there, or you're dealing with maybe a Russian Stalingrad or Kremlin, harder to get those pins in that you would want. So then you just switch to high explosive. Maybe you get to set them on fire, overwhelm their damage control party. So that is an option to run here. Alternatively, you could run the emergency repair specialist. If you did, it would be taking off a few seconds, and your cooldown time would be reduced on your damage control party and your repair party. So you could have it off a little bit more quicker and ready to go. For a 3-point commander, we're taking Increase the Gears, which improves our main battery traverse speed by plus 20%, which brings us to that current 43.1 second, 180 degree turret traverse time. A 6-point commander, then I would take Adrenaline Rush, get that reload time down even more, where you could be seeing a 25 to 24 second reload time, as an example with these 10 457mm guns. A little bit more reduced time on your airstrike armament reload time, reduced time on your secondary battery reload, and then a slight buff to your AA. But the main thing you take here, purpose, is for that main battery. And then it depends sometimes. If you only have a 10-point build, then maybe a commander, I would say just go for Concealment Expert first. Get yourself down to that 12.1 kilometer. Make it easier to disengage. And just rock that because it's such a good concealment here on this tier 10 battleship. And then for a 14-point build, then what I would go for next would be the Fire Prevention Expert. This reduces your risk of catching fire by negative 10%, and maximum number of fires, negative 1. So without Fire Prevention, if you're newer to World Warships or maybe you don't understand what that skill means, is right now, without it, you'd have 4 fires set on your ship, 1 on the bow, 1 on the stern, and 2 on a superstructure. Fire Prevention eliminates there being 2 fires on your superstructure, and thus only taking it into 1 on your superstructure. And most players in the game, HE spammers, they're firing your superstructure, so then you're ticking for less damage, and only having 1 fire lit on your superstructure versus 2. So it's a really important skill to be running on battleships. So I would do 10 points there, then 14 points, but maybe you have a 14-point commander, no sweat. Then just go for those 2 first. And then it's up to you what you do next. You could build up for an 18-point commander and then take the Emergency Repair Expert, which is going to increase your action time on your damage control party from 10 seconds to 11 seconds. You have an unlimited number of charges of those. Your repair party consumable action time is going from 28 seconds to 30.8 seconds. And then you're going to get 5 repair parties versus just the 4. Now I burned through all of my heals on here on Bungo, so I would want to build into having 5. Okay, so you could go for this first for an 18-point build, or I had Azuma at 17 points, so I just went ahead and picked the basics of survivability. And reducing our module restoration time by negative 15%, and fire and flooding recovery extinguishing time negative 15%. So we're putting out the fires, we're putting out the floods even faster. But for a 21-point build, this would be the pretty standard build you're going to see on most battleships here in World Warships. It's going to look very much like this. Sometimes, rather than the gun feeder, you're going to see Emergency Repair Specialist. So that's another one I would consider. I actually, on Yamato, I run this build, except without gun feeder. I take Emergency Repair Specialist in place of gun feeder. So then I didn't feel like I needed to build a copy-paste commander, so to speak. But you could run that instead of gun feeder. The other thing that's worth mentioning here is Brisk. Because this battleship has such good concealment, you would actually get your money's worth out of running brisk here. Plus 10% on your ship speed. So then you're going to be adding 3.1 knots. So that's going to tip you over 34.6, I think, if I do the math correctly off the top of my head. So then what I would do is I would take Emergency Repair Expert. I would drop Basics of Survivability, pick up Brisk, and then I would, with my 1 point remaining, I would take Emergency Repair Specialist. Now, I want you to know that I'm very tempted to run that as another build option here on Bungo. To me, this would be my first recommendation, and then my second recommendation would be dropping Basics of Survivability, pick up Brisk, and Emergency Repair Specialist. And then you don't have to kind of choose between the two of them, right? And then you're able to reposition, move around pretty quick. But note that your reload time, you know, we built into it, it's 26.4 seconds. So then you have like if you're firing constantly, right, you're going to only have 6.4 seconds, 8 seconds of Brisk utilizing itself, and then you're detected, or maybe you fire undetected, or maybe you need to reposition, right? Then you're going to get a lot of mileage out of Brisk in that regard. It just varies what happens battle to battle, right? But beyond that, I really wouldn't recommend different build options here on Bungo. I mean, she's not a brawling battleship, so you wouldn't take secondaries. Like, I'd rather run like a secondary Shikishima than a secondary Bungo. You wouldn't want to have the heavier AP because you're going to be really critical on your hit points for your command. Hit points, you know, 83,800, and she's doesn't have the like a 40-second cooldown time on a repair party. You know, you wouldn't be taking Furious, and her AA is okay, but there's other tier 10 battleships that run the AA skills even better. She's just a pretty straightforward tier 10 mid-range sniping battleship that's really satisfying to play. So that's how I would phrase Bungo. Pretty straightforward to play, and this would be the 21-point build I would recommend here. This one, or Brisk with the Emergency Repair Specialist, dropping Basic Survivability, then having the Emergency Repair Expert, right? Just dropping out that skill and that skill. So with that being said, let's go bring the video to a close. Let me know if you already have Bungo, what you like running on your ship. We can chat below in the comments, or you can ask me if there's something I didn't cover that maybe you're curious about. So, I hope you liked today's video. If you did, give a thumbs up. If you didn't, give a thumbs down. Subscribe if you do want to see more. If you are subscribed, thanks so much. I really appreciate it. And thank you to my Patreon supporters. So until next time, take care.